keep adding up that the Charlotte Hornets will take Brandon Miller at number 2. Plus, there's some more information coming out about Miller's pre-draft process. We discuss all today on Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. As always, we are free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube, where we just passed the 4,000 subscriber mark, and we really appreciate it. If we get to 5,000 subscribers, Doug Branson of Every Hornets Boxscore will don a grandmama dress with the wig and the pearls and
I got
all
the
of
hat.
good
I
stuff.
finally, after many weeks, I didn't think I was going to get the hat. I ordered the hat from like this small shop in New York online. I thought they just took my money and ran, but all of a sudden, many weeks later, the hat shows up that looks exactly like the grandmama hat. So
I forgot about that. Yeah, we did have an episode months ago where I was like, oh well, I just sent my money somewhere and they they think that I'm
some mafia operation in New York just took my money. No, I got the pillbox hat. I also want to mention for the listeners that are watching this on YouTube, both of us have decided to wear a purple shirt today. We are
first
purple
time
shirt
ever. Yeah,
twinsies. We don't see each other before the show until the little graphic goes away and reveals us. So how did you feel about seeing us as twinsies?
It's hilarious because it just makes me realize how little I wear purple, because you wear that LaMelo shirt pretty frequently. Like, I don't know, once a week, something like that. You'll don the LaMelo thing. And this is a new shirt for me. So I'm sporting Glenn Rice today. I went crazy on TeePublic, Doug. I had the Grandmama shirt on Monday. I had my Muggsy and Manute Bowl shirt on yesterday. So I went crazy on TeePublic. There's Glenn Rice. I just don't feel like there are enough Glenn Rice shirts roaming around Charlotte. When the guy's 3-year run was offensively the best 3-year stretch, just no question about it here in the Hornets franchise history.
That's one of the problems with Charlotte Hornets history in general, is that the players that we really should celebrate more, we don't, because their tenure was relatively short. You know, we talked yesterday on yesterday's show about the 35th anniversary coming up, and I think, again, that's part of the struggle with celebrating the 35th anniversary, especially so short after the 30th anniversary. But it's difficult because, number one, they don't have a storied history in the playoffs, but also some of the players that you want to celebrate were only here for a few seasons.
Right. I mean, yeah. So Glenn was here for 3 years. The shooting numbers, I wish I could do them justice. They were absolutely crazy. To shoot 47% on the volume, lead the league in minutes alongside Anthony Mason. Oh, it was fun. They didn't get deep to in the postseason because, well, their owner now, Michael Jordan, he would stop some of that every once in a while. But it was a lot of fun, even if it was those 3 years and they didn't make deep postseason runs. It was fun to relative success here with the Charlotte Hornets. So again, that's Doug. He writes about the Hornets on his Substack. Again, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And I'm Walker Mail. Catch me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Also, I did want to remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Today's episode brought to you by Birddogs, where you can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. And when you enter promo code LockedOnNBA, they'll throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti-style tumbler with every single order. So we appreciate Birddogs sponsoring the show. All right, Doug, let's get to the current players, or the players that might be here in a Charlotte Hornet uniform. Let's focus a little more on Brandon Miller today, because we had the previous reporting from Jonathan Givony of ESPN that the interviews weren't going very well for Brandon Miller. And then we saw some people combat that, whether it be our very own Rafael Barlow of Locked On Big Board, who said that he had heard Brandon Miller had tonsillitis, and that's why some of the interviews weren't going very well, which is possible. Well, now Brandon Miller, he was out of shape. The interviews weren't going great. Maybe that was because he did indeed have mono. So that would be a real problem if you are trying to evaluate, one, talking a whole lot, and two, trying to play basketball as hard as you can so you can get drafted as high as you can. So that's one thing about Brandon in the pre-draft process. I'll say something else before I kick it to you. The Hornets are also sending attorneys to Alabama to investigate Miller's role in the shooting death of Jamia Harris. And so Brandon Miller was driving the vehicle that had the gun in it that would then be relayed to Darius Miles, then be used by somebody right alongside Darius Miles and shooting Jamia Harris to death. And so that was a very serious role throughout the college basketball season. But Brandon Miller wasn't suspended for some long period of time. Alabama was criticized. Of course, the Hornets or whoever is going to draft Brandon Miller can expect, I should say, and maybe even accept some type of PR backlash and some sort of criticism. I don't even know how much, though. What do you make of those two things real quickly in the pre-draft process, Doug?
Well, so yeah, when we say he was out of shape, it wasn't like he was coming in there schlumpy. He just had lost some weight, and he was already a guy that probably needed to hit the weight room regardless. But because of the mono, he had lost some weight, so he probably looked pretty thin, and he didn't play. So, teams are going to have to wait until the possibility of an individual workout, and the mono probably set back his whole pre-draft process. These guys, after their seasons are over, they gear up, get their bodies ready, get their minds right to show off for these teams. And while other people were doing that, he was forced to sit down. I've had mono. I don't know if you've had mono.
I've not.
It makes you super tired, like to the point where it's like, I cannot get out of bed. I must remain here because I cannot even walk to the refrigerator to get a drink. I had it in my senior year of high school. So it's
these old kissing Doug Branson back in the day. I see you, big dog.
No comment. To protect the innocent. So yeah, I mean, it is serious, and hopefully he is almost recovered. I mean, I think it took me, nearly a month and a half to get over it. So
that's what I was going to ask too. Like that's the thing I noticed. I don't know much about mono. I know that it lasts a long time. I had one of my best friends.
It's different for everyone. I mean, everyone's body responds to it differently. And there's not. I mean, I don't know. It's been a long time since I had it, so maybe they've. But when I had it, they were like, "Look, there's not much we can do for you. You kind of just have to fight your way through it." So I don't know if the science has changed on that, or and these guys typically have pretty good care for them as they prepare to launch themselves into the NBA. So I imagine if there was something that they could do to get him through an accelerated process, they've probably done that. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult now. Teams are already kind of making a bet on these players because they're coming out at 18 or 19. And when something jumps in the way like this, that's difficult. And then you add on the fact that you've got this incident that there's real concern about in terms of like a lawsuit, I assume, from the Harris family that could involve Brandon Miller and his role, or any other kind of information coming out. Because I'm sure some teams look at this and go, is there some big time college? Now, Alabama basketball is big now, but Alabama football, I'm sure there's some, over the many years, there has been some help from the community, maybe. And look, I'm a Tar Heel fan. I know all about, police being a little bit more friendly towards, big time basketball players than they would be to the general public. So I'm sure there's some concern from teams like, hey, was this a situation where maybe he was a little bit more involved than he was letting on? And that's going to come out eventually. So they've now sending a team of lawyers. Look, that doesn't seem good, when you're having to send your attorneys to investigate what happened with a player that you could be potentially committing a super high draft pick to. None of that seems great to me.
Well, no, especially with the report also. I believe in this Gavoni reporting too, that the Hornets want to bring back Miles Bridges, just flat out saying it in this report. So there's wanting to bring back Miles. That complicates things just from a legal standpoint, right? Miles Bridges had the felony domestic violence arrest, and now here you are bringing Brandon Miller, who, let's be clear, was not charged with anything. It's not criminally involved from a standpoint where he is going to be arrested, at least at this point in time. Things could change based on whatever, but that's exactly why Alabama, that was their defense, whether you think that's camouflage or not. That was their defense as to allow him to play basketball throughout the course of the regular season. So there are some reports as well about Brandon actually doing well with the content of the interview, somebody that seems like he does want to surround himself with better people when we go to that cliche, getting out of any situation that is deemed bad. So We'll just gather more information through people gathering more information and see exactly what happens with Miller. But it could be a wide range. And Dougie's interviewing with 12 teams. So if Scoot Henderson is interviewing,
he knows it could be a wide range.
Exactly. So if Scoot Henderson is only interviewing with 3, like, nah, man, if the Hornets pass up on me, cool. But Portland sure isn't. But with Brandon, it's like, all right, if this thing gets crazy, then maybe I do need to interview with 12 that is reported here. And so he understands, like, this thing could be a slip and fall in the draft come the selection process night.
Well, we should mention that I think the teams that were disappointed in the interviews it seemed like from this reporting that they were disappointed essentially that Brandon Miller came armed with a lawyer of his own and some paperwork that essentially said, I can't talk about a lot of this because it is an ongoing investigation. And teams wanted answers because, hey, in a few weeks, we're about to commit a decision that could set our franchise on the right track for the next decade or continue on the wrong track if you're the Charlotte Hornets. So they wanted answers, and now they've got to send resources down to Alabama to do some investigating of their own because they're not getting satisfactory answers from the Brandon Miller team. There is one other thing from this report that I think makes this whole situation even more tenuous, even more scary, and I think we should talk about it in the next segment.
Yeah. All right. So what a tease. Let's do it. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. We had long been speculating about the sale of the Charlotte Hornets. Could it be really affected by the NBA draft? We'll get to that in just a moment. But this episode first is brought to you by Birddogs. Birddogs are pants or shorts that have a fantastic fit. They are extremely comfortable. They're also very versatile, so you can look better and feel great wearing Birddogs. Their stretchy fabric makes legs look fantastic. I'll always point to Doug Branson wearing his Birddogs
I'm wearing
and
them right
showing
now.
off his butt on camera. Fantastic. They're comfier than any other shorts or pants out there. They give Doug and everyone else the freedom to wear a pair of shorts or pants.
Room to breathe. I would say room to breathe.
Okay.
If you know what I mean.
And I think we do. No, Doug being a little raunchy today with the mono and
raunchy.
the room to breathe and the Birddogs. Oh yeah, Doug Branson.
Birddogging it.
You can wear them to a meeting, a date, or just hanging out with friends, doing a podcast such as Doug is. There are so many different ways that you can wear Birddogs. So what you can do is you can go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. And when you enter promo code LockedOnNBA, they'll even throw in a free custom Birddogs Yeti style tumbler with every single order. So you get your Birddogs and you get your tumbler when you visit birddogs.com/LockedOnNBA. More Locked On Hornets coming up next.
Is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. That was. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes
It seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
All right, Doug. So what you so seductively teased at the very end of the segment, there was something else about this report. Oh, do you have your tumbler? Is that your Birddog tumbler?
I got my tumbler. I'm totally bought and sold on this program. It's fine because I'm enjoying this tumbler, and it came at a perfect time because I lost my Nalgene. I'm sure people have seen it on the YouTube channel, the purple and teal Nalgene that I have. RIP, I miss you already. But this Birddog tumbler came just in time.
You are a company man. You are very much so a company man, and I appreciate it. All right, let's go to what you teased here, Doug, because something else in this report, or what Jonathan Givony was discussing, he said, quote, Michael Jordan was awaiting the possibility of landing the number 1 pick before deciding whether to proceed with the sale, sources told ESPN. It remains to be seen whether moving up to number 2 changes that plan and what the timetable might look like if a sale did occur, as well as how that might affect the front office's decision-making process in regard to who to draft. To be fair, this is exactly what we speculated. It's the thing we talked about quite a bit. If they land Wemby, that is going to affect the sale of the team. Now, I didn't know whether it was going to serve as a catalyst or serve as something you wanted to hold on to, because they immediately become more valuable. Wemby increases the value exponentially right off the bat. Scoot doesn't as much, but he does increase the value. The number 2 pick is going to make this a little more exciting than what it was if you would have gotten the 6th pick, I think pretty significantly so. So I just didn't know if Michael would have wanted to hold on to it or sell it. And now it feels like he's trying to make that decision as well. What did you make of that little excerpt?
Yeah, it's tough. It's a little vague, so it's a little up to your interpretation. It's probably going to be, somewhat influence your interpretation by how you feel about the front office. I'm going to interpret this as meaning that if this is just how I feel, I don't have any extra reporting on this, but I just feel like if Jordan and company owned the number 1 pick and it was Victor Wembanyama, they would feel like, okay, we've got a chance to turn this thing around. And from Michael Jordan's perspective, I think I can care again, because I think we've been through many years now where Michael Jordan, not that he hasn't cared at all, but there have been other things that it's pretty clear, like his race team.
His race team is big.
That he cares a lot more about at this point. And I think the number of seasons that this team has not won a playoff series under his management has worn on his patience and worn on his ability to care as much as he probably would otherwise. And so if you've got Victor, all of a sudden that completely changes, because I don't know that Victor Wembanyama really raises the sale number to some degree where it would actually influence a decision. I mean, I think he's going to make a lot of money regardless of whether it's Victor or whether it's Scoot or Brandon Miller. But I do think now that the sale is more of a possibility, and that scares me, because I don't see how they can get. I mean, maybe it happens. Maybe they sell the team, and then this new ownership group is able to be installed, and a new general manager comes in. But it seems like really late in the process, in this draft process, to have that happen at this point. So now you've got this potential scenario where Mitch Kupchak is selecting a draft pick that, and then leaving, and leaving that draft pick for the next generation of Hornets ownership and management. And when you're talking about a guy in Brandon Miller that does have some of these, concerns off the court, that concerns enough for a team to send a team of lawyers to Alabama to investigate, and you add on to that the Miles Bridges decision, all of a sudden, the Hornets could have a lot of problems in their lap, and the people responsible for presenting those problems are all of a sudden gone.
Well, and two, you're right about that. There's enough of an indecision here between Brandon Miller and Scoot Henderson to where any next regime could come in and say they didn't like this pick. They wouldn't say it, but there could be some reports and use insiders' mouthpieces to say it. But also at the same time, when you're this high up in the draft, that becomes a little less believable, because if you're 6th or 7th, then you quite literally, I mean, you could want anybody at that point. But if you're up here at number 2, if Scoot Henderson is, I don't know what percentage you want to put on it. Let's say Scoot Henderson is 60% what people think the Hornets should do at number 2, and Brandon Miller is 40%. Now, not what the consensus is, right? But just fans. It seems like we're getting more Scoot advocates than Brandon Miller advocates, at least on the YouTube comment section. What I get on WFNZ, Twitter, feels like still people are in on Scoot. But regardless, it's not like a new regime could come in and say, well, we would have done something completely different. I mean, I guess you could have traded that for pieces to win now. But also with these new owners, they want the young star to help them kind of progress too. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the new regime would do. But you're right. It's because of that uncertainty that might leave you a little scared. And, Doug, we are getting added reporting here. Brandon Miller at least is the favorite right now among any insider out there, I guess. Like Jonathan Givony, he said the consensus was in Chicago at the lottery event, at the Combine, that Charlotte was going to take Brandon Miller. And now we have this report, or this article, I should say, on Bleacher Report from Jonathan Wasserman saying, quote, there is a current belief that members of Charlotte's front office think Brandon Miller can be a star. The idea that Scoot is the obvious Victor Wembanyama consolation prize has lost strength over the last few months. Some noted that people made up their minds on Henderson too early, especially after his big game versus Wemby. But there it is. Some people believe the Hornets think Brandon is a star. Now, this is also kind of all right, well, how much of that sourcing is coming from within the organization, right? Both of these reports from Gavoni or Wasserman, they're not saying sources from the Hornets tell me they like Miller. And I guess that would portray some confidence if you're reporting. I don't know, just not buying it. Like, I'm just not doing that right now. I can't. We've had so many people get draft projections wrong this early, even if it is down between two guys, because they don't want you to know who they're going to take. I mean, Carolina in the NFL draft, they had the number 1 pick. It didn't matter. Orlando last year in the NBA draft, it didn't matter. But they still didn't want you to know who they were going to take because of maybe paranoia, because of maybe it just opens up the door slightly for any kind of strategy that they want to go outside of just selecting whoever at number 1. They don't want you to know. And that's what I think here is happening. They still aren't having any of that sourcing come from within the organization.
Yeah, it's super early. Like, we haven't even gotten to the pro days for both of these guys. No individual workouts, if those are going to manifest for Charlotte. So I think we're really early in this process. I don't put a lot of stock into it. I would say on the Hornets traditionally being tight-lipped, that is true, but they haven't often been in this position where literally the entire world of the NBA is looking at them. I tweeted out the picture of Kevin from The Office saying, everyone is looking at me. Like, that's how the Hornets feel right now, because unofficially they are on the clock. Everyone is 99.9% confident that Victor Wembanyama is the pick for the Spurs, meaning everyone is paying attention. Everyone is picking around the edges. Everyone's asking, there are a lot of people on a NBA team's executive team, and it just takes one of those people that are in the know to start chirping. So it's, this is not a scenario where like everybody's just asking for an off the record comment from Mitch Kupchak. That's not, this is asking everybody, and all it takes is one person to talk. So I'm not going to completely discount if this were the 11th pick, then it's like, nobody's going to talk about the 11th pick, but you're talking about the number 2 overall pick when you are unofficially on the clock. I think we should lend a little bit more credence to some of these rumors, but not this early in the process. I think we need to take a couple more steps before I'm ready to be convinced. And then, as you said, though, everything gets flipped on its head when it comes down to the draft. Because I think one thing we do know about Mitch Kupchak is that he operates down to the last minute. Like, this is not a guy. I mean, he's almost said as much when he's been talking about the sort of draft war room experience. This is a guy that's going to be taking calls and figuring stuff out and moving things around on the draft board right down to the last second before he makes that pick. This is not a guy who like locks it in, puts on the horse racing blinders, 3 weeks in advance and moves forward. So we got to, buckle in, strap in. We got a long way to go. And, subscribe to the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Do all of that. It is imperative that you do all of that. All right, we'll have some finishing thoughts on that and discuss a departure from the Hornets organization coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast. Charlotte lost an assistant coach that's pretty damn high regarded. How big of a deal is that going to be next season and beyond? We'll get to that in the last segment today. But first, I did want to remind you that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, and you should make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs, because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. They have great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app. You can get paid instantly. All perks of joining FanDuel right now. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets.
Is Locked On Hornets.
But I have seen him go all the way up to number 10. Is there a warning? Do we need to get out of here?
Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if you heard, but my watch went off, and I was trying to silence it, and then I accidentally hit ping the phone, and then the phone pinged, and now here we are. I'm doing my best, man.
It seems like you're doing your very worst.
Well, sometimes
it seems like I'm actively fighting you today to move.
Sometimes my best is my worst.
It's time for more of the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Yeah, I wanted to finish up some of the conversation from the last segment about the leagues. And you're right. Like, at first I was going to say, well, we were kind of in this situation when LaMelo was the third pick and all eyes were on us, except all eyes weren't on us to this level. You're so right, because not only are you moving up one selection, but it's also a much more high profile draft. Now, LaMelo did bring his own contingency of, of this popularity of him being a star out throughout high school, being the guy that cherry picked his way to 100 points when he was a freshman on the Chino Hill squad. Like, we knew, especially with his older brother. So people did want to know who was drafting LaMelo, and people got that very wrong. There were some reports out there. It was like, hey, the Hornets are not going to be drafting LaMelo. And what do? They draft LaMelo at number 3. So I think you go back to Orlando and then even Carolina this year with the number 1 pick. I just think it is going to be hard this early, to your point, but also, everybody wants to know what Charlotte's going to do. You know what the Spurs are going to do. What is Charlotte going to do? Because that dictates what's Portland going to do. And then there's a big story there about, okay, well, does Damian want to play alongside Scoot Henderson? They already gave money to Anthony Simons. And so, there's this domino effect that does start with Charlotte. So I imagine you're right. A lot of people are going to be knocking on the door trying to get information out of that team.
Like, objectively, I'm glad the Hornets have the number 2 overall pick, but subjectively, I would rather be in Portland's position, which was Charlotte's position.
So many people have said that. Yeah, they just don't want the decision. Just wash your hands, done. Just give me the leftover.
Well, I want the decision. I don't want the Hornets to have the decision.
So many people.
I don't want that front office to. I would love the decision because I would just mark it down now, Scoot, and move forward. But I don't want them to have the decision.
Well,
I'm sorry. I don't trust my front office right now. A front office that, by the way, might not even be the front office next season.
That's right. No, of course. If we were the GM, we'd get it right. That's why I trust us. Of course, not Mitch Kupchak. All right, Doug, you had something that you wanted to kick off the last segment with. What was on your mind?
I'm just disappointed, man. I don't think this LeBron to Charlotte thing's going to ever happen. It looks like he's on the road to retirement. I just don't. I'm now, hold on, though, this, I know we're talking about this draft right now, but hey, this 2024 draft's coming up. Bronny James still in the mix. Who knows where Charlotte's going to land in that draft? And hey, they've got a lot of draft assets in this one. I don't know if you've heard. They've got 5 draft picks.
They do.
It doesn't seem like Mitch is going to make all of those picks. So maybe he turns that into some draft capital for next season. Draft Bronny James. LeBron comes out of retirement to play for Charlotte. Who knows?
That would be great. So now you get Scoot, you get LaMelo, you get Bronny, you get LeBron James, you have Mark Williams, and all of a sudden you're
that's a 6 seed right there.
At least
6 seed.
At least that is a first round competitive bounce, though.
Even
if it's a bounce, it's competitive.
Give me the 6 seed. I'm sick, Daddy.
Oh yeah, the 6 seed is what we're always pushing for. Maybe it might be a little bit harder this year, just a little bit.
We should call it, instead of the 6th seed, we should call it the 6th seed.
That's what we're saying. Yeah, that's what I thought that was the joke, to be honest. I kept going with it.
Well, now we've confirmed that it is the joke. I love your shirt.
Yeah, swish, baby. Go ahead. Glenn Rice, 6 seed. That's what they were getting to. Let's talk about the departure of one coach that was pretty celebrated on this squad, so much so that Charlotte wanted to retain him when they were looking for their new coach last offseason. Jay Hernandez leaves Charlotte for Brooklyn. Steve Clifford, he did have one of the largest coaching staffs in the NBA this past season because of what I was just talking about, right? The Hornets wanted to hold over a few of the coaching assistants.
Because of their immense talent, right? It had nothing to do with the amount of money that they were contractually obligated to pay these people when they abruptly fired James Borrego, who they were also on the hook for paying for. It had nothing to do with that. It was their connections with the current roster and all of that, so forth and so on.
What I will say is, no, you're totally right about that, because there was that reporting. That was one of the handful of excuses Kenny Atkinson used as to why he wanted to stay in Golden State. Look, you can put Prowse to it. That's fine. I can believe that a little more when there's not the other excuses surrounding it. Well, we're just going to stay in Golden State. Well, you knew the situation before you took the job. You did. So anyways, that's fine. What I'll say about Jay Hernandez, he is, a lot of people point to him and say, I got better because that guy was on the staff. None other than Kemba Walker, where we all saw the dribble routines before games between Jay and Kemba. Kemba gave him a lot of praise for him being on the staff. I think a lot of people too, like Nick Friedman, I think is a good assistant coach on this squad, just with the relationship that you hear he's built with players, especially being like the liaison between the G League and Charlotte, and a lot of people really gravitated towards a relationship with him. So I think those are the two guys that come to mind as far as being good coaches on that staff. And plus, I think Jay Hernandez just being a great guard mind, Doug. If you're going to get Scoot Henderson, you have LaMelo Ball. I do think you lose the most valuable coach on the assistant staff when talking about LaMelo being your best player. And if we want to draft Scoot, now you're losing a guard-minded coach. It hurts a little bit, in my opinion. I don't know what that means to less losses or whatever, but it does suck. Like, I'd certainly rather have him than not.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect a replacement at this point. I wouldn't expect any more additions to the coaching staff because it is already large. And I think Steve Clifford was softly lamenting that in an interview that he did with Adrian Wojnarowski on the Woj Pod before the season got started, that there's been some, overinflation of coaching staffs since he's been in the league.
He did say that, yeah.
So I wouldn't expect them to add anyone. I don't think that this devastates the team. I agree. Jay was an asset. Nick was an asset. And ultimately, I think all of these guys, whether they're Clifford guys or Borrego guys, ought to see the writing on the wall and understand that when you're in the midst of a team that could possibly sell, they ought to go to LinkedIn and, brush off the old CV and make sure that everything's, looking good. And if an opportunity comes your way, and that's the problem, by the way, with being involved in these team sale rumors, and why I hope, whether Michael Jordan remains the owner or decides to sell, I hope this gets resolved in a public way, like where he's saying, I'm staying and I'm committed, or I'm selling, goodbye, or I guess not goodbye, but I'm going to take a back seat or whatever. I hope it gets resolved quickly, because it's hard to both obtain and retain talent in that kind of uncertain environment.
It is, and we'll see exactly how it all unfolds this offseason, but we have no clue who's going to be an authority figure. Do you hear the beagle barking in the background? Because he's going crazy right now. I think he's taking it a little harder that Jay Hernandez is leaving than I am. So I think with that, we probably end the show with old Guinness just howling back in the background. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks again for making us your first listen every day. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Make sure you check out Game to Game, NBA, every top performance, every result from across the league. Check it out anywhere you get your pods.
The Hornets hounds are out in the boot.
Oh, man, the Bumpuses. Damn you, Bumpuses. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow.